The Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew, the 9th and 10th chapters. Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming good news of the kingdom, and curing every disease and every sickness. And when he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, ask the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest." Then Jesus summoned his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to cure every disease and every sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, also known as Peter, and his brother Andrew. James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector, James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the Cananaean, and Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed him. These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions: "Go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. As you go, proclaim the good news. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. You received without payment, give without payment." The gospel of the Lord. Please be seated. Grace, peace, and mercy are yours from the triune God. Amen. In today's gospel, Jesus is really in the groove of his ministry. He is healing, he is curing, he is casting out demons, he is teaching, and walking around all over Israel doing his thing, and by healing and teaching and creating freedom for people for whatever is keeping them from the community of God. He is proclaiming the good news of the kingdom. To read it another way, when all people receive healing and peace and freedom, the kingdom becomes near to them. I'll say that again. When people receive healing and peace and freedom, the kingdom becomes near to them. So Jesus is doing his thing, bringing the kingdom near to people. And he's doing a really good job of it because he's Jesus, and how could he not? And Jesus turns around and sees the crowd, and he has compassion for them because they were helpless and harassed. Remember that because it's important. And he then summons his disciples and tells them to do the same thing. Essentially, he repeats what he has been doing this whole time. He says to them, "Proclaim the kingdom of heaven coming near by curing the sick, raising the dead, cleansing the lepers, and casting out demons." That's what he's just got done doing. So now he's telling his disciples to do the same thing he has been doing. Because the laborers are few and the harvest is ready. The people are ready for freedom. The crowds are hungry. There are people being taken advantage of. The state is looking the other way or making it worse, and they need help. The people are ready for the kingdom of heaven to come near. So out of compassion, Jesus sends the disciples, and by proxy us, to do the same work he has been doing, to heal and teach and proclaim freedom, and to bring the kingdom of heaven near to people, which is a good thing. We know that this is what we are supposed to be doing as a church. But it starts with compassion. That's where Jesus starts this whole thing. Compassion is an interesting word. What does compassion mean to you? This is a real question. Caring, kindness. Empathy. Helping. Good. Compassion is like all of that. The root word of compassion is from the Latin word meaning calm, as in mutual. Remember like 2 weeks ago, we talked about the commission, calm, being with, mutuality. And the second part comes from pati, which means to suffer. We're talking about mutual suffering. Jesus looked upon the crowd and suffered with them because they were helpless and harassed like a sheep without a shepherd. There was no hope and no help. The Greek is similar to the Latin meaning of compassion. Its root is around a feeling in the pit of the stomach, a wrenching feeling that goes beyond sympathy or feeling bad, like empathy. It brings us into action. It becomes real. With the feeling Jesus is describing, which we translate as compassion, another person's suffering or hurt and struggle, it becomes active to us and real to us. Someone suffering who was once over there all of a sudden is near. It's right there for us to feel and experience for ourselves, and we suffer too. Another person's suffering becomes ours. That is what Jesus is talking about here. Have you had that experience? Let me tell you a couple quick stories here. So, when I was an undergrad, for 2 years in my undergrad, I lived in the dorms for 4 years, because when do you get a chance to live in a dorm for 4 years? Not everybody chooses to do that. I chose to do that because it's a weird time to be alive. So, for 2 of those years, I had a gay roommate. In a very conservative Christian college, where you would get kicked out of school if you were gay. And sometimes my roommate would show up and talk to me about the things he experienced that day and how these Christians had treated him and looked at him and said things to him, and he'd have to hide who he was to people. How he was ignored. How people looked at him in fear, like they were going to catch something. And the gut-wrenching feeling in the Greek word compassion became pretty close to what it was. It becomes real when you live that close to somebody. It wasn't happening to me. It was happening to a very good friend of mine. Here's another story. While I was working with kids at a residential treatment facility some years later, we let some kids go try and integrate back into the community, learning how to live in their families and their houses. And while they were away, one of them got a gun from his brother and shot and killed the other one. These are kids that I spent every day with. Taught them how to learn, taught them how to go to school, life skills, ate meals with them, shared joys and concern. Because somebody had an easy access to a gun, this 17-year-old kid spent the rest of his life in prison now. And the other one has a family that will miss him forever. Here's another story. One time I was walking with a dear friend of mine to a wrestling practice, and we crossed the street and someone screamed out of their truck window and called them a horrible name because of the color of their skin. My friend grabbed my arm. He told me to keep my head down and walk faster. And he felt afraid in a small town where he was supposed to feel safe. And they screamed as we walked across the sidewalk and made some threats that he should go back to Mexico, and then they sped away. But he was born in this little idyllic Dutch town of 6,000 people. 6,000 people. He knew everybody, lived there his whole life. He marched in the stupid wooden shoes that the bands all walked in. And this was not the first time this had happened to him. It was something that he was always ready for. So Jesus looked at these crowds and he felt compassion. Gut-wrenching, in the pit of the stomach, compassion. For they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. And he loved them and came close to them. And he commanded us to do the same thing. To come close to the things that are going on in the world. And to learn it, for it to be real. It's through people's story, right? It's through coming near to the suffering, near to someone's suffering, where it wrenches our gut and it becomes real to us. We know this to be true. And this is where we start from. This is where we start to proclaim the kingdom of heaven coming near. Compassion and coming near to another person's story, where we build relationships and allow the space between our lives, our suffering, our hurt, our pain to grow thinner and thinner. We become more and more vulnerable with each other. We hear each other's real life stories. And another person is actually able to be close to us. Because, church, it is by getting closer and closer to someone's suffering that we get closer and closer to the cross, to the passion, to the ultimate compassion. It is from that space of nearness that we stand with each other in solidarity, in love, in confidence, in humanity, and in compassion, and fight for the healing and respect and rights that all people deserve and cry out for. When we do this, we are able to stand with one another. When we heal and teach and love like Jesus commands out of compassion, when we stay near to the cross with each other in our suffering and pain, then the kingdom of heaven will be proclaimed. It will become near to us. Amen.